Christmas sleep tips for excited children. In the run up to Christmas, kids do get excited. There's more and more excitement brewing as time goes on. And of course, it's harder for them to settle to sleep when they're super excited. Either that or they get so exhausted they crash out, and then that just makes things worse as well. So how can you help them? Well, my first tip for you is avoid overtiredness in the run up to Christmas. So it's very easy when, particularly when school's finished for Christmas, or even if it hasn't, just there's so much going on with various activities even after school. For the younger ones who aren't even at school, there's baby groups and there's Christmas parties and there's Meet Santa here and there's this carol evening there, and there's just so many things going on, and it's easy to get caught up in that whole spin. You lose track of time because it's dark by 4 o'clock anyway, so you know there's no real cue to go, oh yes, it's time to get ready for bed now. And before you know it, your bedtime routine has got nudged back later and later, and you know, several nights in a row you're finding that you're getting your little one down to sleep a bit later than usual. It catches up with them, and for some it doesn't take more than one late night for it to be a problem. But if you have a few of these in the run up to Christmas, you're gonna have an overtired child, and you're gonna have repercussions like disturbed sleep at night, maybe early rising, which is gonna perpetuate that overtired problem even more. So be really careful to avoid overtiredness. Make sure little ones are getting enough daytime sleep. Make sure the older ones are getting to bed promptly in the evenings and not staying up too late. Make sure they're not watching Christmas movies until, you know, a minute before they go off for bath time and bedtime. They need a good, clear, you know, at least, well, they say an hour really, but at least 30 minutes, but I would say an hour of no screens before even beginning the bedtime routine. I don't mean before being asleep. I mean before going up to start getting ready for bed. So just avoid that overtiredness. It's going to really stand you in good stead. It's such an easy one to slip into as well. The second one is about sticking to your routine steps wherever you are. So if you're visiting family, if you're staying over at, you know, at family's house, or even if you're at home but you have house guests in with you, just try and stick to those same routine steps. Perhaps you're even going away for Christmas. Maybe you'll be in a whole different country, in a whole different climate. Wherever you are, just try and keep those steps of your routine happening in the same order every night, so that the cues are there and so that your little one knows that bedtime's coming, and doesn't slip out of routine. So keeping to that routine and those routines regardless of where you are. My next tip for you is massively around the intake of foods, sugary foods. Okay, so around Christmas time there are lots of treats. Maybe there are chocolates on the tree, candy canes. I mentioned that there might be some parties going on and people like to give out, you know, mince pies and cookies and candies and all kinds of things. It's just a time for sweet treats, isn't it? And for some reason we allow our children way more than we allow ourselves. So just be careful of that, because if they're having those things close to bedtime, again, that sugar can create an adrenaline rush, which can then just create a bit of a hyper spurt before bed, which isn't going to help them. I'm thinking that's more likely to be the older, slightly older ones, rather than your sort of toddlers, certainly not your babies. But just be mindful of that going forward, that they're not just suddenly getting lots of sweet treats in the lead up to bedtime. And stick to your rules as well, your rules, your rule book around sleeping. So for instance, if you have a cut-off time, like a particular time in the morning when it's okay to start the day, perhaps you use a clock that signals to the child when it's okay to start the day, then stick to it. Just because it's Christmas doesn't mean you can break the rules. That said, if you want to facilitate your child being allowed to get up a little bit earlier on Christmas Day, change the clock. Don't let them know, but change the clock so that the clock changes a little earlier. If they're asleep, they won't notice. It's just a light change. If they're awake, they've got that permission to get up rather than you thinking, I've got to anchor them down a bit longer. So work that out, how it's going to suit you, especially with Christmas Day itself. But otherwise, generally in the build up to Christmas, just really do stick to your rules as usual, because just by ignoring a rule like a wake up clock and going, oh yeah, it doesn't matter today, why should they ever take it seriously again? If you're going to just dismiss it one day, why not the next day? And maybe the next day, and you'll find that you might get a bit of testing. So stick to your rules. I'm referring here to like wake up clocks as a signal, but any rules, it could be about how they settle to sleep at bedtime. It could be any rule that you have around sleep. It could be that your child isn't allowed to sleep in your bed with you and they have to stay in their bed all night, but suddenly it's Christmas and you decide that it's okay, or it's Christmas Eve and they're excited and you decide that it's okay, or you're staying away from home so you decide that it's okay. Just be really careful not to bend those rules too much, because it will be hard for the child to understand and get back on track, especially the younger ones. They won't really understand your logic or your reasoning for why it's okay this one time or these 2 times, but it isn't usually okay. So you're going to probably get more consistent and better quality sleep from that child if you stick with it. Stick to your usual plan. So there you go, some tips for you for helping those excited children sleep soundly in the lead up to Christmas and around Christmas time.